Thinking Aloud. Conversations on the leading edge of knowledge and discovery with psychologist Jeffrey Mishlove.
Hello and welcome. Our topic today is the power of ritual in the 20th century, and my guest is Anna Halprin, the director of the Tamalpa Institute in Marin County, California, a person who has led ritual dances throughout the world now for many decades. Welcome to the program, Anna.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
You
know, I
Jeffrey.
remember many years ago participating in city dance and other rituals you've done throughout San Francisco, and you've mentioned that you've been in Europe leading these massive rituals. The feeling that I have when I see people expressing themselves and moving their bodies together and in unison, it's powerful, it's archetypal, it's liberating, it seems to be giving people permission to contact a forgotten, archaic, primitive part of themselves. How did you get started? What inspired a nice person like you to?
Well, that goes back quite a while. I have been dancing most of my life, and when I was in New York at the some sort of a dance festival, I was the one dancer from outside of New York City that had been invited to this dance festival, and I was watching dance for a period of 2 weeks, day and night, and suddenly it hit me that I couldn't connect anymore with what I was seeing on stage and the reality of my everyday life. And I got very depressed and very discouraged with the sense that dance seemed to be an abstraction about stories that didn't seem to have anything to do with real life issues. They were like fairy tales. And
Swan Lake.
and even the modern dance forms of that day. And when I came back to my home base, which was the foot of Mount Tamalpais, I began to just chuck everything and wanted to start again from scratch. I wanted to go back to what I thought were seminal beginnings of dance. And in that process of returning to the seminal sources of dance, I began to discover the life process, the life issues, and connect it with myself and my own life and the lives of those who I was working with the very expression of what it was we were dancing about. And so I started what was known as the life art process. And that's how it all started.
And it seems, and I've had a few opportunities to observe and to participate in this work, it's allowing people to get in touch with the symbols that emerge from their dreams, from their unconscious mind, and to express these things physically in their bodies and to feel uninhibited about doing where normally we walk through our days and this is not considered appropriate behavior for adults.
Well, what I've been interested in doing is exploring the use of movement as the mother of all the arts, so that if you disarm yourself from patterns of movement, and if you were to do a simple movement, can I demonstrate? Because it's very hard for me to abstractly
Can you do
talk.
it without getting up from the chair
I'll do
too
it with
much?
I'll do it with my
of course,
arms.
Yes.
Let's say that we do a movement that has to do with moving forward. Now, if I simply change the rhythm of that movement, and I suggest that we might move very fast, we could even do it together, you and I could do it together. So take that same movement, instead of just moving forward like that, we change that movement and we might do it very fast. Now, immediately when you do that, something is stirred up, right? Let's take that same movement, we'll take it very fast forward, and then we can take the same movement very slowly back. And you'll notice that without any prediction, it's going to arouse some kind of a feeling. So let's do it together. We'll go very fast and then slowly back.
Okay.
Go. And now very slowly back. Now, if everybody did that with us, everybody here would have a feeling that would be aroused, some kind of a feeling, some excitation. You also would, if you did it several times, a certain image or association would come to mind. It might have to do with fear or withdrawal or something that would remind you of something in your own life. And so that germinal beginnings would start triggering off the connection between how you move physically, what feelings are aroused, and what images come to you. And I could just change that whole thing by moving very slowly forward and then doing that. Well, now, that's not a pattern of movement that's you dance this way. But if you just do this, or you do this, or you change it from forward to all these things are a language.
You're creating meaning through your movements.
Right. And it's universal to everybody. Anybody would do these movements, and you just work with time frame, with the space frame, with the force behind the movement, and you've immediately triggered off a sense of a meaning or behind that movement. Now, it's very powerful material because you may trigger off all kinds of feelings that are suddenly disarmed. They're non-censored. So feelings that you have that perhaps you didn't predict these feelings to happen are suddenly happening, and it may bring you to tears, or it may bring you to laughter, or it may bring you to surprise. But it's unpredictable, and you are releasing and unfolding the very symbols of your life that you live by in an unaware way. Now, once you become aware of those symbols, you can begin to create some desirable choices in your life, and you have the opportunity to make some choices of patterns that have been destructive, that create disease in your body, or you can begin to move into more desirable choices and say, this is what's going on in me, and I didn't know this. Because somehow or other, my habitual way of living my life hasn't allowed me to get in touch with these movements which become symbols. These symbols have a story behind them, which are your myths. Like my story would be very different than your story, but when I start experiencing those stories, and then when I perform them, those are my rituals. So you have the movement as the symbol. What it means to you, I am frightened, this reminds me of, that begins to be the unfolding of your particular myth.
Because there's a universal quality.
Right. And then you're doing it becomes the ritual. And in doing those rituals, you are manifesting and externalizing what's going on inside of you unconsciously. And then suddenly you have choices. I can go on living in this way in which it is self-destructive to my creativity, or it is growth-producing. And so the implications are incredible. The implications for healing, the implications for making sense out of the mysteries of your life, the implications of being able to direct your life towards desirable ends.
Or to achieve breakthroughs if you're stuck. It's a question if I'm feeling stuck, say, on an intellectual problem or an emotional relationship, I might just need to find a new movement. Yeah,
the implications are very, very great on all levels, because this is the way archaic people did live their lives. If they wanted to have the corn grow, they do corn dances. They wanted to be successful in the hunt, they would do hunt dances. They wanted to heal the sick, they would do healing dances. Initiate the young, be successful in war, celebrate a marriage. Always the community expressed themselves, and we can do the same.
You know, what you're saying, I think a certain segment of our culture sort of dismisses all of this ritual stuff as being primitive, and yet I find it's consistent with modern psychology, such as the James Lang theory of emotion, for example, which says that if you bang your fist, then you get angry. The movement comes first, and the emotion follows.
But we can also, we also can do a pretty good job in Western culture of masking our movements and masking our feelings.
Yes.
And putting on a very repressed set of movement behavior patterns, which then set into the body and create this so-called armor that Reich talked
Wilhelm
about.
Reich, the psychiatrist, described our emotions getting locked up in rigid muscular patterns.
Exactly.
So through dance, through ritual, we dissolve the armor, so to speak.
Yes, and one of the implications for me personally is that I've, after doing something like City Dance in San Francisco and sort of building up slowly to its possibilities for bringing people together, one of the reasons for City Dance was it was a way to bring
thousands of people
together in different neighborhoods. And as you know, there's the Fillmore neighborhood, and then there's the Mission District, and then there's the commercial business district, and it was a way to bring communities together. Also used rituals to during the period when the black community in the country was rioting, and so we used dance to bring a group of white young people together with a group of black people, and we actually did dealt with a real situation where a group of black people in Watts had never seen this group of white people in San Francisco, and we worked separately for 9 months, and then 10 days the two groups came together, and after having developed this mutual vocabulary of this particular way of working with movement, for 10 days they lived together day and night and built a dance on the real life situation of what it was like for black people and white people who had never really touched or been together, and used this ritual to heal the racial wounds, and it became a metaphor that could be a possibility for dealing with differences and diversities and different lifestyles.
And you brought with you a video clip of one of these rituals.
Yeah, then
we'll show that in a little while.
Oh, we're going to see it now or a little bit later?
In a little.
In a moment when we talk about what it is.
They need a bit of time to set it up.
Okay. That particular clip that we're going to see, which I'm working on now, is called Circle the Earth, and it's a way to use ritual to help people make sense out of the fears of death and destruction in a nuclear age, and to explore the myth of peace in an age where war has become a national science. Peacemaking can become a community art, and so we're looking at ritual now as a way for people to say, well, what are the myths of peace when we have been living out myths of warfare? How can we live myths of peace? And so we're using ritual for that end right now.
Well, let's take a look at that now. it's amazing how they went from such anger and violence to such loving emotions in such a short time. What was happening there?
Well, what's happening is that that's the section of the dance where the performers are required to confront their own dark side, to literally confront what isn't peaceful in themselves, their own warmongering, their own killer within themselves, which we call the dark side. And there are two roles in that scene. One is the warriors, the spiritual warriors, who are in the line of black and white.
And these are not professional dancers,
These are
either.
all ordinary people.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it touching to me, is to see ordinary people who aren't dancers commit themselves to do something which they feel is an act of creating peace. And so what they're doing in this section is encouraging and giving strength to those people who have been initiated into looking at their dark side, the killer in themselves, and we call these the masked dancers. And that's why they're looking so ugly and so awful, is that they literally are facing their own killer in themselves, and it's very real to them. They're not play acting. And at the end, when they release this killer, it's like a great catharsis, as if they've confronted their worst enemy, the monster in their darkest, most nightmarish dreams, and then out of that release comes the gentleness, the love, the softness, and the restoration. And when that happens and they're supporting one another, there is this great sense of the emergence of the ability to love and to support and to feel compassion. Then they pass through the bridge to the more peaceful, dynamic state of peace.
It's as if your ritual is expressing a real biological truth that
It really
sometimes
is,
you
I
need to
hope.
contract very much before
Yes.
you can open up and relax.
Yes, yes.
It would be quite an art if people around the world could learn to do that.
Well, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. We're beginning to take this peace dance for large numbers of people, 100 minimum, and it is going around the world.
This is called Circle the Earth?
It's called Circle the Earth. It didn't start as Circle the Earth. You might be interested to know that it started right here on Mount Tamalpais as a challenge. I was really challenged. You see, I'll be real fast because I know we're running out of time, but I got cancer myself about 12 years ago, and I realized that in order for me to heal myself and to find again the nurturing part of myself, that I too was going to have to look at my own killer. What did I do? What was I doing to myself? What was the killer in me that was in the symbol of a cancer? And so I discovered my cancer in a visualization that I did, in an image that I created of myself. And I was not able to dance that image.
Drawing a picture of your body.
I drew a picture of my body, and I wasn't able to dance it. And what happened was that I went to the doctor the next day because I knew intuitively there was some little silent voice in there that was saying, there's something wrong, you won't do your dance. And when I went to the doctor and said, examine me here, and I pointed to the place where I had drawn a dark spot, and I said, would you examine me here? And when he examined me, he found that I had cancer. And that started a whole research around the relationship between what you image and what you are and what's going on in your life. And it took me 10 years to understand how to work with imagery in relationship to the myth and the symbol and the ritual aspect. And I really used my own body as a battleground to do this research, and worked through my cancer using this process.
And that led you to take the same process.
Then what happened, I wasn't expecting this, but what happened is that my husband and I had were interested in exploring what are the community myths that are really important to be looked at, because we're living in a world in which the environment is being destroyed. It's being destroyed right here in Marin County, and our life is just being threatened. Our very survival is being threatened. So what are our myths that we're living by? And we just started exploring that as an open question for the community. And we did a series of workshops for 9 months. And people kept drawing pictures of the mountain. Well, that was just at the time when there was the trailside killer. And he'd been on the loose for 2 years. And
like
he
a
had,
cancer on the mountain.
ooh, he had killed how many women on our trails? I think at least 2 or 3. And so there was this silent rage in the community, and it was like a taboo. It was so awful. Nobody would talk about it. You know, like how many people in a private conversation or at any kind of a social gathering will talk about their subliminal fears of extinction in this nuclear age? Well, it was like that with the killer. Nobody would talk about it. Finally, I said, what is this mountain that keeps appearing in your images? And it all came out. The fear of the killer on that mountain, and that we could no longer walk the trails of the mountain.
And he was at large at this time.
He was at large. And you really were no longer able to walk. And if you did go on the trails, all you saw were warning signs. It was terrible. It was absolutely an outrage. And just this burst of outrage and anger and helplessness was just released in talk. And then out of that talk, people said, let's do something. And out of let's do something came the idea that we would create a dance in which we would reclaim the mountain. And we did, and it was called In and Out of the Mountain. And Tamalpa Institute enacted the real life story of that killer on the mountain. It was what we did in the dance was the killings. And then the next day, we went to the mountain. We bussed ourselves up to the mountain. Only 80 people would go up, but 80 people went up. And we walked down the trails and reclaimed it after the dance. And very soon after that,
3 days later,
the killer was caught.
So it's like as if what you were able to do with your own body, ridding yourself of this cancer.
I used the same principles and those same principles I applied to a community.
To healing the community of this problem.
Of working with those ideas. And I used 7 years to work on this structure, which I couldn't really find the format until after 5 years.
They grow over time.
Yes,
These rituals have a life of their own. They're like organisms.
Right, and it kept changing and changing until finally it grew into Circle the Earth. And Don Jose Mitsua is a
Indian shaman.
Yes, and he came here. He said he was drawn here to this mountain because he felt something important was happening. And he said he was drawn here. And he came up to the mountain with us and he planted a feather up there. And then he said to me, this is nice what you people are doing. And in order for it to be a true ritual, you must do it for 5 years. And I said, all right, we'll do it for 5 years. And it took 5 years for Carpenter
to be convicted.
To be convicted.
You were up for it.
And it took me 5 years to understand what it was about until we arrived at a new format which says we need at least 100 people because we need to create a networking of bodies that are so strong and so powerful that it will break through our individual limitations and create an image so big, that armor that will be so big that it'll go beyond what we can do by ourselves, and it'll create such a huge voice that it will create for all of us the ability to touch on peaceful ways.
It's as if we could dance together with the Soviets, if we could dance together with the Islamic peoples, that might be the greatest expression of biological unity.
Yeah, and we're doing that. You see, we've now taken the dance all around, not the people, but the structure that the people here in Marin created. We've taken it to New York, to the United Nations Plaza. We've gone to the American Dance Festival. We've gone to New Mexico and danced with American Indians. We've taken it to a Pomo roundhouse and danced with the Pomo people. We've taken it to all 4 corners of our land, and now we went to Switzerland with 151 people who danced it. People came from all over Europe. We're going to Australia. Yes, it's our hope to go to Russia. And this year, we're going to do our first planetary dance. And all the places where we have been, we're going to link with these people, and we're going to do a run. It's called a Planetary Run, and it's a mandala of peace done through a running format. And we hope to link up on Easter Sunday of this year with a minimum of 2,000 people in 4 continents. So that's where this ritual is going next.
So it seems as if you're taking something very primeval, very biological, and you're making it really relevant to the needs of the 20th century.
That's what we hope to be doing. I mean, that's our vision, and that's our commitment.
Well, Anna Halprin, it has been a real pleasure being with you. I'm amazed at the way you combine the qualities of the psychologist, the artist, even the high priestess and the shamaness together with a philosopher. It's very unifying, and I think that's really what you are bringing to your work, is a sense of unifying the ancient and the modern. Thank you very much for being with me.
Thank you. It was nice to be here.
It's been a pleasure. And thank you very much for being with us.